Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
Hey, this is Tyler.
And this is KC.
And you're listening to
The Element Podcast.
What's happening, all my woods people? That is music from Lyle Blackburn and his band Ghoul. Lyle let us use that music because Lyle is on the podcast today and we asked him.
That's right. And if you don't know anything about music, when you're independent, right?
Yeah.
You have the rights to your music.
Yeah, you don't have to, a label would have your rights otherwise. So like big artists that you know, typically the label has the rights to their music, if not all of them.
Yeah.
Most of them. So
yeah.
You don't get to just willy-nilly throw your music wherever you want it. But
those willy-nillys.
But that's not Willie Nelson.
So Lyle is an expert on all things cryptic. He is a monster hunter, a musician, author, and all kinds of cool stuff. And we'll have him on and talk a little bit more in a little bit. But
you think he's an expert on kryptonite?
I bet.
You think?
That's pretty cryptic. We should have asked him so much more stuff. It was a long interview as is because there's so many questions to be asked. One of the things Tyler and I talked about before we got on this interview is that when we're talking to other whitetail people and other hunters in general, like, you kind of already know a lot of the same stuff. So there's not quite as much to talk about. There's still stuff. Right? We still have podcasts. But like this, it's like Pandora's box has exploded and Bigfoots are going everywhere, Like, it is just, dude, so many cool things to talk about.
So many different ways to pluralize
that's right.
the word Bigfoot.
Yeah.
So you just said Bigfoots, but I'm pretty sure you said big feet at some point, too.
Yeah.
So I like big feet better, though.
Big socks? Big shoes?
I've got big feet, actually.
That's you.
Yeah.
Dude, speaking of big feet, you were selling some waders on Facebook the other day, or recently.
Nobody's going to buy them
because they size 14s. But why are you selling all your stuff, Tyler?
Because I went through a bunch of my storage unit and cleaned it up because it needed to have some more room in it. And I'm moving everything out of my house right now. I am beat. Like, dude, it's just like ridiculous. So here's the deal is like there's a few trees on my property right now. Well, actually, not a lot, but there's some in like my neighborhood and on my property that I kind of have access to that are just small trees that I can plant, like oaks and groundsel and this one pine that I'm going to get, I think. But like, I only have a few days left before we close to get those trees. So like I'm in this whole moving mode and I'm also in the same boat as like I got to get these trees, and then also if I don't plant them the same day, they're going to die a lot of times, you know? So I'm like, it's crazy. It's been raining, which it rains every time we move. Last time we moved, it rained cats and dogs, and Chris and Jamie helped us move out all night one night, the night before we closed. It's just soaking wet, going through all our nasty stuff, you know, and just I don't know. It's been a bit of a beat down. Luckily today wasn't raining very much, except for this morning a little bit. So, been moving everything out. I'm homeless pretty much officially starting tonight.
All right.
Like, I mean, we still got the home, but there's no bed or couch in it for us to sleep in. It's just a bunch of little things laying all over the floor that have to be cleaned up, thrown away, and that kind of thing. So.
Isn't it funny how I've moved a lot, right? And when you go to move and like you move the big stuff,
yeah,
and then you move the boxes of stuff, and then sooner or later you get to this point where you're just like, let's just throw all that away.
Pretty much,
It's like probably like, I don't know, 3 or 4 boxes worth of junk. It's just like, I don't feel like moving that.
3 or 4
like,
until you have a 4 and an 8-year-old,
and
then it's like 300 or 400 boxes of throwaway stuff.
I bet. Did the terrarium make the trip?
It will, I guess.
Yeah.
I imagine, but I'll tell you this, because the terrarium's like a decent article that my family owns compared to what literally was under my couch. I don't know how, Kaylee and I don't know how our couch wasn't levitating off of the ground. It was so much stuff underneath it.
I believe it.
It was outrageous, dude.
I believe it.
It's still all sitting there pretty much, you know. I mean, some of it got swept up and thrown away, but there's so much stuff, dude. And this is just a small space, which, you know, you still kind of got to, whether you got 2,000 feet or 567 square feet, you still got to have quite a bit of things. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because it takes some things to live that you have to have. But I guess we were just really efficient on how we put it all in there.
It's kind of like when you and your wife and I have been talking about house plans. Like, the bigger your house is, the less per square foot it costs to build the house. Mm-hmm. But overall, it's a higher dollar amount because you got to have, like, you have to have a kitchen sink no matter if you have a house your size or a mansion on the lake, right? But you know what? I'm still real sad that that T-Bone never came over and used the bathroom in that shop.
Really?
You remember when we were building the bathroom, we were talking about how, like, if we had bigger friends come over, are they going to be able to use the bathroom?
Yes. I do remember that.
That's what we're going to say.
I could not figure out where you're going.
One of these days, T-Bone's going to come over and have to, you know, like, that was going to be the place where, like, people were going to stay when they came into town to go hunting and stuff with us.
Yeah, that was like the mother-in-law quarters that weren't used for the mother-in-law, basically. And, T-Bone... We just hadn't quite made friends with him yet.
That's right, T-Bone. You'll get to come over to the next place. Whenever I pivot here, right? But whenever I was leaving home,
Stephenville,
talking about moving, the biggest move I ever made in my life is I moved from Sulphur Springs, Texas, to College Station, Texas. And boy, what you talking about a culture shock? But
it wasn't as bad as mine.
Probably not.
Dude, it
wasn't.
At least at College Station, there's a few people that
it was
like
country.
You.
I went from, like, real country to, like, bro country, right?
Yeah.
You went from country to...
Royalty.
Yes. But, so I'm only child. I'm the only person kind of my age in my family. Me and my granddad have a real tight relationship. You know that. And he's spunkier 12 years ago than what he is now. My granddad offered 2 things to me to instead of moving off. He wasn't trying to talk me out of college or anything, but just kind of like, hey, let's do this. One time he offered to buy me my own, like, legit nice center console boat, and so I could become a guide on the Texas coast, and I turned that down. I kind of regret that one. A lot of good things. You know how that goes, right? If we're just going to take that snippet, right? Like, I would like to have done that. That would have been cool. This other thing would have been cool, too. My granddad offered to tell me to postpone college for a year. We would both take a year off doing whatever we were doing, and we would go be Bigfoot researchers for 1 year, and he would finance the whole thing. And I thought about it for like a week and decided not to do it. I did, dude. I thought about it because, I'm not going to let y'all in on the big secret, but for a while there, I was a big-time believer in Bigfoot. A big-time believer, man. And so that's why I'm pretty excited to do this podcast with Lyle today because this dude, I don't know if he's a believer or not. We're going to, talk to him and find out, but he definitely has dedicated a big part of his life to Bigfoot and a lot of other really interesting, crazy things. And, as a lot of these podcasts are, this one's pre-recorded. We've already done this interview, but one of the things I find really interesting about Lyle is that the human side of it means a lot to him. Like interviewing people, talking to people, like that's the part that like means a lot. And I think that as I get older, as a deer hunter or as a hunter, elk hunter, hog hunter, whatever, like it's fun to go on these like really crazy trips where, like say, like the Gila last year was you and I against the wilderness, right? But it's also real cool to like go on hunts like our hog hunt this year, or like Kansas whenever there's a bunch of people in camp or whatever, and like have that human quality to the hunt, man. That's real cool, and it makes it a different experience.
Yeah, I agree, man. That's you know, we talk about this a lot, and we have, but you know, the solo hunter kind of aspect is a big thing right now. A lot of guys think that it's super cool to go out and accomplish something by themselves, whether that's, you know, backcountry elk or whatever it is. And I'll tell you this, man, I was super pumped up when I shot my Texas buck this year, but it would have been way more hype fest if you'd have been in the tree with me. You know what I
guarantee you that.
Like, it would have been. I was real stoked, but I wasn't like, nothing was coming out. And so like when you start like vocalizing your excitement, it starts getting more and more. You know, sometimes that's what would have happened if you had somebody in the tree with you. You know, so
in Nameless, you do this thing. You're like.
it's because I was shaking. I had to let it out. And
it's so much fun.
My head moved so fast. During that. Yeah,
and that's kind of the cool thing too, for as far as capturing things on video. Like when there's two of us and we can just like talk about it, it's very natural. Whenever you're by yourself, you have to like take these thoughts and try to like vocalize them in an interview so that it's not just you freaking out silently just with a camera on you, right? So it's just not as natural.
And you have to you got to get the camera set up and the white balance set and exposure and everything, or whatever you're doing. Like all different settings have to be right. And by that point, you're like not even thinking about what just happened.
Yeah.
It's like, man, you know, you lose a little bit of that hype. But it was still hype. But like, there's just something about the social aspect of hunting that is sometimes not very popular in some circles, and that's okay. I think it's cool to like challenge yourself to do something on your own sometimes, you know. But like, man, I like hunting. I like party hunting. Brian Coke.
That's right. That's right. Well, speaking of capturing things on film, why don't we talk to Lyle and see how many big feet he's got on camera these days?
Okay, let's do it. All right, so now on the phone we've got author, musician, TV personality, monster hunter. I mean, the list goes on and on. This is Lyle Blackburn. What's going on, Lyle?
Hey, not much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude. What's been happening lately, man? It's you live in Texas, right?
Right. Yeah, I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Cool. So, you know, I've been just hanging out, locked down, you know, watching horror movies and working on a new book.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, so we live just east of the Metroplex there, DFW. So we are right up the road from you, man. The weather's been pretty nice this spring, man. I don't know. I've heard some weird things about like actually KC was telling me that a lot of people think that less cars on the road equals less heat for some reason. So, but I know today it feels wonderful, man.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm always grateful for any days when you can go outside and either not freeze or burn up. It's like that perfect zone, so I'm digging it.
We get a little bit of both of that, man. It's tough here, but you know, being outdoors a lot, man, for us, you know, we have to deal with the weather a lot, and I'm sure you're in the same boat. You know, we mentioned in the intro here you're a monster hunter, but you grew up hunting, right? Like hunting actual game animals and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. My dad is just a, you know, lifelong hunter. So he was into deer hunting, mostly with a bow. And we did gun hunting. And when I was young, I liked to turkey hunt a lot. And so, you know, I've hunted, you know, turkey and deer, other things here and there with a little bit with a bow. I was mostly a gun guy, but, you know, I love the bow too.
Sure. You speak kind of past tense there. Do you not hunt anymore?
No, I really don't. Life became really busy. And when I became a musician, there was a lot of touring, and it seemed like almost every weekend, was playing or doing stuff. And so the lifestyle kind of curtailed any sort of hunting. But I was always kind of into outdoors, even just camping and, canoeing and stuff. So I kind of just got to where I would just enjoy the time in the outdoors rather than have to go, in a certain hunting season or any of that. I just kind of went and did what I did.
Sure, I got you. So I actually toured for almost 10 years as well in a band. Our bands are a little bit different. The first one I was in was actually probably a little more similar to what you do. But man, seems like a lot of people are pretty attracted to what you've done, man. How many albums have you put out?
I think we've done 8. There's some of those are EPs and so forth, but I mean, the band, this band of Ghoul Town, my current band is more of an indie band. I kind of used to do stuff. We were on labels and stuff, and then I went independent, which I'm glad, because over the last 20 years, it's like that's what a lot of bands can do. It's much easier now, but I played in bands before that, and just it's been great because I've had the opportunity to tour a lot of the world and see so many things and do all that. So it was it's always been a great experience.
Yeah, that's cool. And the name of your band is pretty particular. Like it kind of brings out kind of the other side of what we wanted to talk to you about some too, is Ghoul Town. So kind of monsters, right? Monster hunters, how you describe yourself. You don't describe yourself, at least to us so far, as a cryptozoologist. How do you feel about that word?
Well, I'm kind of okay with it, but there's no real accreditation for that title, and it has some connotations. And for me, I never really just came out and said, "Hey, I'm a cryptozoologist," because, again, I don't have any particular schooling or training. It's just like sort of on the job training. So people call me that, and it's easy way to describe myself. But ultimately, I'm as a writer, I'm sort of like this sort of I see myself more as like an Indiana Jones journalist guy who, monster hunter, and kind of my childhood vision of like something like that. So cryptozoologists, there's a lot of guys I know that are very skilled in that, but they do have more science background and stuff. For me, it's like just sort of exploring the legends and the stories and just going in those wild places myself and seeing what I can see,
Yeah, that's cool. So do you feel like you kind of derive your inspiration from a different point than what like a quote cryptozoologist would?
Somewhat. I think that a lot of people who are into this pursuit, whether they write books or just simply like want to, research Bigfoot, a lot of them are out to prove it. That's never really been my total focus, because that almost to me, it almost sets me up for potential failure, because a lot of this proof is scant, and it's hard to prove anything. But to me, just the fact that people in modern times are reporting sightings of creatures that may or may not exist, and the fact that there's this phenomenon going on, this undercurrent that people are familiar with, but when you interview people on a daily basis, you're just like, man, this is mind-blowing. And it can affect a whole small town to the point where some sightings happened some years ago, and then now there's a festival that 10,000 people show up.
Yeah.
That's just a crazy phenomenon. And as a guy who loves horror movies and loved, Bigfoot and Yeti and Loch Ness Monster as a kid, I'm like, it's just mind blowing that this is going on. So to me, it was just all of that was fascinating. Not just the fact that, hey, if I can prove this, or if I get a picture or some evidence or whatever, that's a bonus, on top of this, the whole research,
Yeah, for sure. So, you describe yourself as a monster hunter. Do you feel like, Bigfoot is kind of your go-to, or do you have other things that you kind of explore and strive to at least do some interviews with people who've seen stuff or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, Bigfoot is obviously the big one, and I mean, there's just simply more encounters and more places, that you can go to where there's been encounters, and it's also almost the most plausible of them. It's like, it's possible. When you start getting into other stuff, lizard men and dog men and other, they're cool things, but there's less sightings and they're almost harder to explain. But I like researching it all. I mean, I wrote a book on this case about a lizard man in South Carolina. It's literally was like people reporting sightings of a creature from the Black Lagoon in modern times, like by this swampy area. So, that's fascinating to me. And then there's a lot of lake monsters and river monsters. I like that stuff. And I've interviewed people that said they've seen pterosaurs, or what people would call a pterodactyl. Like I was in Oklahoma, and two independent sets of witnesses said they saw this dinosaur-looking bird fly over. And there was two people that saw it together. Individually, these people didn't know each other. So I'll follow any of these stories, especially if it falls in line with what I'm currently researching, certainly. But I'll pretty much, get contacted all the time. And if I think that's a credible story or sounds cool, I'll go ahead and log it in,
Yeah. So you said lizard men and dog men, like plural. What are plural Bigfoot?
I think that's still under debate. Is it big foots or big feet? Sasquatches. Yeah. It's like, I guess it's like deer. There's some deer, or there is a deer, or there's a Bigfoot, or some Bigfoot. It's a hard one.
I gotcha.
Do you feel like you're talking about credible sources and that sort of thing, and the Oklahoma sightings kind of perked my attention when you talked about that, because I remember doing a little reading about like the Thunderbird and different things like that, and I think that's what they're called. But a lot of this stuff kind of goes back to like Native American tales. Do you feel like that's a function of just society, like people are going to kind of see the same weird stuff, or do you think that like that is like maybe some reference to proof there?
Yeah, I think that's, it's almost like the chicken or the egg debate. It's like, do we as a race of people, are we naturally inclined to see things like that? Or, were the Native Americans seeing the same things as we're seeing now? Because, naturally, if these things exist now, they had to have been here all along. And certainly the Native Americans would have had sightings, and they certainly do have stories of thunderbirds and what they called forest giants or hairy men that you can interpret as, well, that sounds a lot like Bigfoot now. So, it's hard to say though with the Native American tales, because they had so many like stories of spirit animals. And there was not so much of a distinction between physical animals and spiritual animals. So it's really hard to tell where they were coming from.
I was reading something by a guy, and he was a Native American or belonged to a tribe, and he was kind of a Bigfoot explorer, or at least had some knowledge, and he just kind of believed that, from his people's perspective, Bigfoot was a shapeshifter. That's why you could never find him, because he could just appear and disappear. And that's a kind of a neat, like, kind of melding of modern stuff and kind of that, I don't know. I like the spooky, you know what I mean? Like, that's cool to me.
Yeah. I've talked to a lot of Native folks that, their view of Bigfoot a lot of times just very matter of fact. They're like, oh yeah, we know these exist. And the reason you can't find them is because they have, whether they're supernatural powers or they're just simply an animal that's super amazing with blending into the woods. Either way, yes, they're there 1 second and they can disappear, and you monster hunters, you're never going to find them. Haha, we know where they are and you'll never find them, kind of an attitude.
Yeah. So in your opinion, where is Bigfoot most likely to live?
Well, based on, stories, incredible sightings and stuff. I mean, obviously the Pacific Northwest, I think is a definite spot. There's a long history of sightings. It's certainly a place that's remote. There's a lot of land, a lot of resources where a large creature could exist. So that's one. But if you want to talk about the South, where I mostly research here because there's plenty of areas that are hot spots and sightings in our area. And I think the area of East Texas into Louisiana and then up into southern Arkansas certainly has the ingredients for supporting some large animal like this. There's a long history of sightings. Many people I've interviewed over the years in this sort of region. So that's a good place. There's also a place in the Ouachita Mountains in Oklahoma where I've also been, and it's got a history of sightings. It's got some very, unexplainable activity up there that seems very, very much like there could be Bigfoots up there. And that's another place where it's like, dude, just to get into some of those places, it's, you drive your truck for, miles and miles in there, and there's nobody out there, and anything could be hiding up in those mountains.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. Tyler and I just went and did some deer scouting in a place just like that in the Ouachita Mountains. It was like 27 miles off of pavement or something like that.
I mean, it took forever to get to where we wanted to park, and then we ended up scouting, the mountains there in Oklahoma. Big chunk of public land, and we kind of get towards the end of the day. We're heading back to the truck, and I mean, no doubt a Bigfoot jumped out. I mean, it was like something took off, and it was very big and black, and we assumed it was a bear or a hog or something like that. I don't know how far the hogs range up that way, but we definitely thought it was a bear that had took off, and it was like, I mean, we didn't get a very good glimpse of it, but dadgummit, it was getting it through the woods.
The hair on the neck was up for sure on all of us, all three of us. So speaking of pigs, what do you think that Bigfoot is eating on a daily basis?
Well, I think just anything, probably. Omnivore, definitely. Roots, nuts, small animals, pigs, anything really. I mean, if you kind of think about, how much we eat or take for granted, but if we were just out there in the woods and you were, 7 feet tall and weighed 500 pounds, you just have to be constantly eating. So I think they can't be too picky. So, a lot of your Bigfoot sightings are in areas like where there's a lot of water, there's rivers, there's, swamps, and certainly, there's abundant things there, frogs and fish and snakes and every kind of weird root, tubers and everything. And then in those mountains up there in Oklahoma, I mean, there's, plenty to eat if you know where to get it. So I think anything. And I've had some of the most dramatic sighting reports and things have come from hunters, and one of these, which leads off a book of mine called Beyond Boggy Creek in Search of the Southern Sasquatch. This guy was over in far East Texas on the Sabine River that separates Texas from Oklahoma, and he was sitting on a tree stand one morning hog hunting, and these hogs came in there he threw out some potatoes, and he could hear the hogs come in, and they were, once they kind of got up there to the spot, he looks over to his right and he sees this ape-looking thing kind of coming up and jumping through the tree, from tree to tree, sneaking up, and the sun was coming up, it was real, just the visibility. But as the light got lighter, he could see it was what looked like some kind of a Bigfoot thing, and the hogs were, didn't smell it, didn't sense it at all. And he said that thing kind of snuck up there, and all of a sudden it just jumped and leapt on one of those hogs and grabbed it, and the others just scattered. And he said it took that hog and threw it against a tree and killed it. And then this dude just watching this, and he picks up the hog and starts walking off, and then suddenly he drops it and he turns around and he looks right up at the hunter in the stand. I think he finally became aware that someone was sitting there, and it looked at him, and the hunter, of course, thought, well, I'm next. And then this whoop came from the woods, and then the thing just picked up the hog and just took off.
Oh man, I'm creeped out right now. That gum. Okay, so the reason I kind of alluded to hogs is because me and my dad were hog hunting one time in East Texas, a little further east of where we were at, and we've actually found a hog carcass about 12 feet up in a tree, and you could definitely tell that it had been killed by something. And everything that is native, as far as we know, to East Texas, the biggest thing would probably be a panther or mountain lion, whatever you want to call it, or a black bear. They don't kill their food and take it up and hang it in trees. So talk about getting weird, right? And it was interesting that you mentioned that hunter said that Bigfoot was coming through the trees, because I never have really heard that illusion. I just always assume that they're bipedal and they just kind of walk around. But, I mean, if they are a great ape, surely they feel pretty comfortable in trees, right? So, I don't know, it's just kind of putting some pieces together. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of those stories where you're talking about finding a hog up in a tree in East Texas, right where, where was the setting of this report. Mm-hmm. You find those things that match up that make you say, what would throw a hog up into a tree? So,
yeah,
you never know. And certainly there's been more and more Bigfoot sightings, I think, and I don't know whether that's because more people are out there looking now or aware of it and paying attention, or whether there's more of them. But there's certainly plenty of hogs. So if they eat hogs, there's no lack of food.
Yeah,
no kidding,
for sure. So
you mentioned earlier about cryptozoologists that are more skilled than you, perhaps. I'm guessing that's you're talking about in pursuing like sign and sightings, like actual sightings of these Bigfoots. I mean, how does that is that what you're talking about? I guess first of all, like these are more like hunter types, I guess.
Well, no, more scientific basis. I mean, I've got it covered as far as hunting outdoors and that, and investigative journalism, I'd say. But if you're talking about, I don't know, just I know guys that have degrees in biology, mm-hmm. That have experience like literally working at a zoo, things like that. So those guys have an aspect that complements obviously the cryptid search. So in cryptozoology, since there is no accreditation, people that are into it range across the board, whether it's just people who just simply write books, or whether they are more in tune to prove this and they're out in the field looking for tracks. And I'm somewhere in the middle, because I'm certainly doing those things, but I'm doing them in the context of evaluating some stories or some areas where sightings have been. So
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, there's been some TV shows, some Sasquatch TV shows, and some of these TV personalities, I used to watch them quite a bit. They'll do all these calls, and they'll beat on these trees and stuff, and they talk about how this is a call that they make when they're doing this or whatever. I mean, it seems a little bit put on for TV. What do you think about that? Like, do these people actually know what they're talking about?
Well, yes. I mean, some shows are better than others, and I mean, I've been on Finding Bigfoot and Monsters and Mysteries and several of the shows, and I know most of those people. Mm-hmm. People have to keep in mind it's entertainment ultimately, and the networks, they don't care if you're proving Bigfoot. They just want to make sure that it's an entertaining show. Mm-hmm. And because Bigfoot research true Bigfoot research is rather boring. I mean, it's almost like, just sitting there looking and mostly find nothing, or just sitting, and it's like a hunting show. I mean, at least on the hunting shows, the dude, the elk or the turkey or the deer, you're going to at least get one. Here, it's like hunting where you don't find anything. So these shows need to have some proactive stuff, and that's where a lot of the wood knocks and the howls and the calls and the let's hang donuts on the tree or whatever. But that needs to be done. But I mean, speaking in some of these personalities like Cliff Barrickman, who was on Finding Bigfoot, he's one of my best buddies, and he's the real deal. That guy was looking for Sasquatch before it was trendy, before he was ever on a show, and he knows his business. And so, but people like, well, he's on a show. It's hard to tell. But then you got shows like Mountain Monsters, which is completely fabricated. I mean, those are nice guys, and they live in the Appalachians, and they know their woods, but that show, they built a trap. They didn't really catch Mothman and it got away. It just, it's TV. Yeah, so, some of those are better than others. And lately they've gotten so goofy now that I don't entertain anymore. I mean, I'm constantly being approached by these production companies and networks that want me to be on the cast of one of these shows, and I just won't do it anymore. I'll be on there on one episode and comment or whatever they want, but sure. I don't trust the networks anymore.
Yeah, I can understand that. So a while ago, you're kind of mentioning tactics to finding big feet. Okay, so what's the weirdest one, like the donut thing? What's the weirdest one you've heard or seen? And then what's the weirdest one you've actually been willing to try? And are they the same?
Right. Well, there's some weird ones. I mean, a lot of them, I guess, make some amount of sense. Like, getting a hold of some gorilla urine and throwing that out in the woods. I mean, it's, who knows if they're going to respond to it, but it makes some amount of sense, just shooting in the dark, and well, maybe this will work. Even the donuts. Oh, hey, who doesn't love donuts?
Yeah. You might at least get to see a black bear that night.
Right, a black bear will find food anywhere. So you never know. But some of the weirdest ones are the business about gifting. There's this whole concept of I'm going to leave this gift, and then the Bigfoot will take it, and then he will leave me a gift, and that sort of elicits some kind of interaction. But I don't know, that if you leave something in the woods and you don't see who picked it up or what picked it up, how do you know it was a Bigfoot? And my first question is always, well, did you put a game camera on it? Because they'll say, oh, it left me this weird doll and stuff. I'm like, well, where's the camera? That's the whole thing, is if you're making a gifting area, it's sort of you're luring them in. How come you don't, and of course that brings up the debate about, well, if you put the camera, suddenly nothing picks up the gift, but there's a whole study that happened to suggest that in my mind, that Sasquatch could sense the cameras and literally actively avoid them, because they did a test with alpha male coyotes, and the coyotes literally could tell there was a camera and would go around it. And the younger ones would walk in front of it. But I'm like, dude, if a coyote can somehow, avoid it, then certainly something that would logically be more intelligent could avoid it, because that's one of the biggest questions. We've got all those game cameras out there. How come we don't have a better picture? I mean, there's some pictures that might be a Bigfoot, but I mean a better one. And so it's possible that they're literally avoiding them. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, and from our landscape as deer hunters, I mean, we try to get pictures of bucks all the time that escape us. So like. Right. You take a being that is supposedly way more cognizant than that, and surely he can kind of avoid being on camera at some point or some way. So just take a theoretical Bigfoot, like what is Bigfoot able to do, like as far as like a scale of intelligence goes?
Well, I mean, to me, I think logically it's sort of like an if-then scenario.
Yeah.
If they do exist, then they must be of a higher intelligence or an awareness that has kept them from being proven all these years. And people go, whoa, how come one doesn't run in front of a truck and stuff? I'm like, well, they do run in front of cars occasionally, but they don't get hit. They are wary enough to stay away, and they would need some kind of sense. I mean, there's a lot of animals that just, I mean, they're shy, and if they see the human, they're going to run, but they don't give a damn. They're just walking across the road. The Sasquatch has to have some intelligence, and then possibly that extends to maybe burying their dead or, trying to stay elusive like that. And I think that people underestimate animals a lot. People are like, well, how could it be out there and nobody see it? I'm like, dude, you can walk right by a deer or a hog or something. Unless it moves or jumps up, you could just walk right past it.
Oh, yeah.
And animals, their fur, their entire makeup is meant to conceal them. I mean, it's like the stripes on a tiger. Those aren't just for, because they're going to be in a circus. Those are meant to break up their form and to hide them in those tall grasses in the environments where they're at. And same thing for Bigfoot. I go out, you go out somewhere, East Texas or Arkansas or in those mountains, and there's so many shadows and trees and stumps and stuff. If some dark figure just stood up there and didn't move, you wouldn't see it. You just simply would go by it. So I think that they're just highly adaptive and highly, built into their environment to where they can, just remain out there and exist without us particularly being able to find them. And that's if they exist, they just have to have those characteristics.
So you keep talking about this area, which is where you've done a lot of research. I think Boggy Creek is in southern Arkansas, correct?
Right.
So is there, and I can say this because I'm a native of East Texas, but is there like a socioeconomic bias in Bigfoot lore? Are there, because you never really hear like, and I can see reasons why, but you never hear like high class or rich people talk about Bigfoot. It's always some backwoods person. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's true to a certain degree. Certainly, I would say most of the people that I interview are rural-based people. Though, I mean, I do know some very smart people that have college degrees, or they served in the military, or even college professors that have experiences or sightings of Bigfoot. So it's not 100%, but it's also just a matter of who is in those environments, who goes you guys hunt. It's a lot of the guys are like, it's dudes who like to go in the woods, and we all talk like, hey man, just, like it was like when I used to hunt with my dad, there was just a certain culture of those people, but those were the dudes that were going out hunting. The people who are, hoity-toity, high class up in their, urban home and stuff. Well, they go, their vacation is spent in the Bahamas or whatever. They're not.
Sure, yeah.
They're not in those places. So I think it's simply because it's the type of person who is in the woods or works in the field, if it would put them out there, or a lot of that. And I think that's why there's a skew towards the people who see it are just, more of that style. So, and I find some of them to be just almost as credible as you can get, because man, these people know the woods. They know the environment. This isn't like some dude, like if I took some city boys out there to the woods, I could scare them real easy. And they're not familiar, and they could see something. I go, dude, I think that's a Sasquatch. Whereas, some old boy who's, lived out there all his life, he's seen it. He knows the environment. So I think they're credible for that, even though when they get on the news, they always pick the most.
Yeah, they do, don't they?
The most with the least teeth, for sure.
Yep. So, and that's what they like for the news.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it sells the story.
That's part of the entertainment aspect.
Do you feel like you're talking about the good old boys and whatnot. Do you think that there's more, or is it possible that there are more Bigfoot sightings that go unreported because people are kind of worried about the social implications of if they actually come out and say, like, hey, I saw Bigfoot, and they don't want to ruin their reputations because of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's more unreported sightings than there are probably reported ones, and there is social implications because I've looked on some of those hunting forums, and occasionally you'll see a guy who posts something about Bigfoot. Usually they don't. Usually it may be just like, hey, I heard that there was an encounter, or I saw this on a thing. And all the posts below it are like, ha ha, did you see a unicorn? Like, you can see why they don't want to say anything because, but if they feel comfortable though, however, like if a service person comes into my house, like the cable guy or whatever, at first, he kind of looks around. There's Bigfoot posters and tracks and stuff all over the house, and they kind of look at it like, so you like Bigfoot? You can see they're kind of fishing. I'm like, yeah, I write books on the subject. I've been on a few of the shows and stuff. Like, oh, really? That's cool. And then they'll go about their business, and then about 5 minutes later, well, man, I wouldn't tell a lot of people this, but one time I was hunting and blah, blah, blah. And then, see, it's not something they didn't go and report this anywhere else. They just know, hey, well, this guy's probably not going to laugh at me. And then they'll tell me, maybe he didn't have a total sighting, but there was something that happened where he goes, it scared me. I don't know what it was. And so I think those are the reports those are the ones I like the most, because it's a person not looking for publicity.
Yeah. Do you think, so this is kind of getting back in the spookiness of Bigfoot, but do you think that there's a level of innocence that Bigfoot would allow for someone to encounter him? You know what I'm saying there? Like, if there's like someone's out there with like economic implications of like trying to find a Bigfoot versus like an innocent being just out, enjoying nature. Like, is there a level to where you think Bigfoot has the ability to sense that sort of a thing?
It's possible. I mean, the animals can be sensitive to things like that, or and it could be that they feel threatened or in some way by the mannerisms or the talking between some guys or what have you. And yeah, it certainly could. I mean, I always find that I think you get these reports where people are camping or something, and you look up and one of these things is looking at them. It's almost like they have a level of curiosity that almost gets the best of them, where they're like, whoops, so if the people seem innocent, or they're just seeing or hanging out, or there's some kids, a lot of times they'll come closer. And then, of course, once they're sighted, they sort of just disappear into the woods. But yeah, I mean, I think that they could sense that, and perhaps, get a little closer than they would if you're, stomping through the woods military style. I think every animal just flees,
Yeah, sure. So you just mentioned it, like a lot of stories talk about how, I came face to face with him, or he looked at me up in the tree, or, when I looked out of my tent, he was right there. Or, his hand reached in the window and I could see this furry hand, or whatever it might be. It all seems to me a lot of times like Bigfoot is harmless in these stories. What are the chances that Bigfoot is going to attack a person and try to kill them, or has killed a person?
Well, I mean, there are some cases where the creatures appear to have been aggressive. That was kind of the whole sensation about the Legend of Boggy Creek sightings, the old movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek in the 70s. Like, one of the reports in there was this family that had moved out there to Fouke, Arkansas, and something was creeping around on their porch at night, and it was trying to get in the house, and the guys ended up trying to shoot at it, and then it literally attacked this young guy, Bobby Ford, and he ended up in the hospital from that. And then you've got there was a case up there in the Kiamichis area of the Ouachitas, where there was a family that claimed these things were, coming around and being aggressive and all that. So most of the sightings, are just simply almost they caught them off guard. It was going across a road, or they were driving and it was standing there, and, it quickly disappears. And then a percentage of those suggest that they could be aggressive. And I think that's just like any animal. I mean, it's like if you run across a bear, 9 times out of 10, it's, it just flees into the woods. They don't want to have anything to do with you. But then there's those times when that bear just flips, or it has some reason to feel threatened, and then boom, it'll take you out. And so perhaps, and you've got all these stories of people who've disappeared in the woods, a lot of them hunters. I mean, who's to say that the reason they disappeared wasn't Bigfoot? I mean, if a Bigfoot wanted to take you out and disappear you would disappear. Is that a word?
I love that.
That was a good description.
That's how I talk, man. So,
man, this reminds me of a thing I read one time. It was like a excerpt from a trapper's journal from, the PNW up there. And supposedly like a guy, they kind of had like a little trapper's cabin where a couple guys were staying there, and they'd go out during the day and run their lines. And a guy supposedly had shot one and had fallen in a ravine, and he couldn't retrieve it. Well, they went back, and he told his friends this, and they all went back and, just kind of went about their business with that night. Like, the family came back and got that guy kind of as like revenge or whatever. And that was like supposedly a real excerpt from a journal, like, I guess you can't call it proof or anything, because it was just like some trappers who may have been drinking whiskey or something, who knows? But, oh man, spooky stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like the Ape Canyon Bigfoot incident from 1924.
Okay, maybe that's what what is that?
That pretty much what you described. It was these guys, and Ape Canyon is out in the area of Mount St. Helens in Washington State. And back in 1924, a group of miners were up there, doing their thing, and one of them ran across this ape-like creature, and he shot it, and then it fell into the ravine. And then they went back to the cabin that night, and then all of a sudden, at some point in the night, rocks started hitting the cabin and all this stuff. And they looked out, and up there on the, was kind of a ridge that overlooked the cabin, and they could see more of these what looked like ape-like creatures standing on two legs, and then tried to get into the cabin and were just assailing the thing through the night. And that was just kind of one of those classic Bigfoot stories that came out of the Pacific Northwest, early on.
That is how you turn me into a city boy real quick.
Normally when I'm like can't sleep at night, it's because I'm still like groggy and kind of half asleep. But that would be a night that I'd be wide awake the whole night.
No, thank you, man. Goodness gracious.
Yeah,
So, what do you think the social structure is of a Bigfoot? Like, how deep does culture run in the Bigfoot society?
Well, I think most of the sightings just are of a single entity, just one of them. Mm-hmm. So, I think that leads us to conjecture that they would be quite solitary. You don't get a lot of reports where there's family units and things like that. Occasionally you do, and you do get reports where they seem to be juveniles, and I think a lot of times that's probably the ones that are getting seen the least experienced. A lady saw one in clear day up by the Sulphur River in East Texas, and she said it looked 5 feet tall, and she was confused. She's like, "Isn't Fouke Monster or Bigfoot supposed to be bigger?" And I said, "Well, they have to grow up if these are real animals, so they could be of any size." Like, "Oh, wow, yeah." But the social structure, they got to have some structure because, in order to have a viable breeding population, they've got to interact in some ways. But I think it's very minimal. They don't have a culture like, they're not building any, people say they build these stick structures and all this stuff. If they do, it's a very temporary sleeping nest, just a nothing permanent. They just need to be on the move, and part of that is just because you got to go where the food is, you got to go where the water is, and you need to keep moving to stay out of sight. So I think it's just a very loose organization, and what family structure there would be based way back in the deepest reaches of the woods, and those that venture out sort of go alone, the lone Sasquatch.
Mm-hmm. This is probably a really ignorant question, but do big feet live outside of North America?
Yes. Yeah. There's histories of reports, that in some cases predate, knowledge of Bigfoot here. There's, of course, the Yeti over there in the Himalayas. There's the Yeren, which is based in China. There's the Yowie, which is in Australia. Many legends around the world that describe a Bigfoot-like creature, and some of these, date back many, many years, and some of them are quite credible, like the Yeren in the mountains of China. They don't let anybody go out there. There's nobody in those woods. Mm-hmm. And there's been some really intriguing footprint casts that have come out of there over the years and things like that. But it's not a place where, you can't take a weekend and go tromping off up in there. Nobody's allowed. It's government properties and things. So, man, there could be something living out there, and we'd never be able to prove it. So,
right.
Yeah. There's all sorts of Bigfoots around the world.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so you talked about this earlier, but what about trail cameras? Like, why have we not captured a photo that everybody can agree on? This is a for real photo of a Bigfoot.
I think the only explanation for that is if they exist, they have to be able to sense those cameras, and they could certainly smell them. Bears will attack them, because they're made out of, the plastic, the petroleum product in the plastic. The bears can find them and they'll tear them up. Mm-hmm. But I think the Sasquatch, not necessarily that they're like, "Ooh, those things take pictures. I don't want my picture made." It's more like when you're in the woods and that's their territory, when they sense or smell something that's alien, then they would, perhaps they steer clear of it. That's really the only explanation, because otherwise, it's hard to get that picture of the buck. It's hard. You rarely get a picture of a cougar, but you do every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. There's a lot of trail cameras out there right now, so.
And there's a bunch. And so, but I mean, there's been photos, but they're just, some of the more intriguing ones are just, it's like the Patterson-Gimlin film or something. There's not enough there to prove or disprove. Mm-hmm. It's like a lot of them you can see and go, dude, I can recognize one of the store-bought suits or whatever, or
Chewy.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, or you can recognize sort of a setup, or it's an illusion. There was one circulated that looked really good, but it was one of those mind tricks. When you looked at it another way, it was like, oh, it's a bird. It was a bird that was closer to the camera, but your mind thought it was further off, and it looked like this gorilla thing. Mm-hmm. So some of it's an illusion, but then there's a handful of those pictures that I really don't know what's in that. Just wasn't a very good picture, and you're like, man, I wish it would have been a better picture, because then you could have ruled it in or out.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the Patterson film?
I think it's possible it's a Bigfoot. I don't like to commit for sure, because certainly I wasn't there, and there's only so much in that film that you can pull out of it. But there's a lot of things, pros and cons, and a lot of the pros are that it holds up to scrutiny pretty well. I mean, it kind of looks like a man, but then again, it doesn't. And if that's a suit, it's the damn best suit ever, because I mean, there was a History Channel show that tried to reproduce the suit with modern, materials and things. And when they did, you looked 5 seconds and you're like, nope, person in a suit. You could throw it right out. And Roger Patterson, that filmed it, how would he, he could have never known that we would years later, we'd have this kind of technology where we can slow it down and enlarge it and, you stabilize it and stuff, and we, I still can't quite disprove it. And I'm good friends with Bob Gimlin, and I find his story credible. I find the guy, as far as he himself, I just don't think he would have purported a hoax. He never got anything for it all those years, and was cut out of all the monetary. And I feel like that if it is a hoax, then Bob was also hoaxed, because it just doesn't seem likely that was a big conspiracy. So I'm still hung jury on it, but I say it's still possible that's a Sasquatch.
Yeah. Is that the most compelling piece of footage you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, it still stands as the best. I mean, it's just the lengthiest and stuff, and clearest. There's been a few others there was one in Mississippi that looks pretty good, and a few others that I find that just can't be explained. But Patterson-Gimlin still stands that's why it's sort of the iconic image of Bigfoot,
Yeah, I mean, you can travel all around the country and see, plywood cutouts of the Patterson-Gimlin, the still
stance.
shot, it's pretty iconic, man, and it's pretty dang cool.
What are the chances that after that Bigfoot went extinct at some point?
Well, I kind of thought about that, especially early on before I was aware of just how many sightings there were or how much it had continued. But I thought, if, again, it was just a solitary creature walking across there, what if that was one of the last of its kind, that seemed possible. But of course, now having interviewed so many people since, that I think at least a portion of these truly saw some unexplainable creature. I guess it wasn't the last one.
That's a good point. Like the California condor, it's kind of now one of the hypotheses is that it's kind of at the end of its time here on Earth because we came out of an ice age and it's kind of an ice age relic where, like, we for a long time thought that, like, oh, humans killed the California condor and that's why it's almost on the verge of extinction, which may or may not be true, but at least that hypothesis is out there. Do you think that Bigfoot came across on the Bering Land Bridge, or do you think that it's kind of indigenous to North America?
I think it would have come across because it seems to make the most sense. And, there's some theories that Bigfoot is a descendant of Gigantopithecus, which was a ape-like creature that lived in Asia, say around 13,000 years ago-ish. And we have some fossils from that, mostly teeth and a jaw, so there's not much left of Gigantopithecus, but it was some sort of a big ape-like creature and could have possibly stood on two legs. And so if some of those did, come over here like hominids did, like that's why people are here. They came across that bridge at some point, so other animals certainly would have and could have done it. And and then also the whole Gigantopithecus thing goes to show you that, people are like, well, where's the fossils, which not in the fossil record. Well, yeah, all we got is a pile of teeth and a jaw for a giant ape that lived in Asia. That's all we got, but the thing existed. So, you minus the jaw and the teeth and you got zero. Well,
yeah, exactly. If people really knew, and I don't know a ton about it, but I've done some research, like how much like fill in the blank there is with fossils and fossil record. Like what we really know about what things were in the fossil record is just, it's pretty minimal compared to like what is all a hypothesis of what this animal looked like. Like, I mean, to take a dinosaur example, the Spinosaurus, I don't know if you know what that is or not, but it's kind of a sort of aquatic right? Dinosaur that fed on fish most likely, and they're big long spill, but it's the one with the big fin on its back, right? Well, just like a month ago they found some new tailbones, and like suddenly they figured out that this thing probably swam around under the water as opposed to just living on the river's edge,
like amphibious or whatever.
Like
right.
And so it's like, man, there's so many things that we just don't know, and that's what kind of makes the Bigfoot thing cool. I mean, well, you probably know this, but wasn't the rumor of like the mountain apes in Africa, wasn't that pretty much a Bigfoot story until they were found in the early 1900s?
Yeah. I mean, that's the same exact thing, because they had come down from those mountains and told people that there's some big ape living up there, and it looked like one that they never seen, and they were just laughed at. And so the slips of mind the name of the guy that went up there. He said, well, I'll show you. And he went up there and shot one and brought it down and said, how's this for you? Yeah. And there you go. So literally the mountain gorilla at some point was a cryptid.
Yeah. So do you feel like it would what's the right way to say this? Is it worth shooting Bigfoot?
Well, I mean, ultimately, to prove Bigfoot, I think we have to have a specimen. If without a type specimen, it's not going to be accepted by mainstream science at this point. I mean, Bigfoot has become such a pop culture icon, and we also have all the technology now to, photos and videos. People are just going to be suspect, so now I don't know if it's worth shooting. I wouldn't shoot one. I mean, I think if I was presented with that, I would be satisfied to see one, and then I guess I would be left with a story, or perhaps, at least get a picture. I mean, even if it's just for my own, you can take it or leave it, but that's the thing. It's like, at this point, to prove something, it would require somebody shooting it. So
yeah,
I don't advocate it. Or, I mean, I know my dad and my uncles and them. If they see one, well, it's going to get proven because they're going to shoot it.
Yeah.
So, say 10 years down the road, it's pretty much proven Bigfoot exists, and we actually even have the abilities to capture one. Does Bigfoot belong in a zoo for people to look at and see?
I don't think so. I kind of don't know if any animals belong in a zoo. It's kind of one of those. It's good for education, but it's sad at the same time. And I think depending on how intelligent the Bigfoot was, as it turns out, that definitely might not be something we want to do. I mean, even those, great apes, they're super smart, and you look at them sitting out there, you're like, man, I don't know, maybe it's a better life because there are poachers and things, but truly it's like, let the animals be free. And so I don't know. I wouldn't want to see a Bigfoot in a zoo. And perhaps they're better off remaining a complete mystery because they're perhaps safer that way.
Yeah.
So do you think is it good for Bigfoot to be a mystery? Like, will it take some of the edge off if sooner or later, like, it's for sure proven?
Well, I think there's enough other mysteries in the world that if Bigfoot becomes proven, then suddenly, like, everybody looks at me and go, dude, you're not crazy. or but
right.
It would take the wind out of the sails because it's kind of the big iconic mystery, and it's great to have mysteries in the world. The world, take it right now. The world sucks,
Yeah.
It's cool to think that there's some stuff we don't quite know or understand, or, it's like gives our imagination somewhere to go. So I think Bigfoot is good for that. And it's good for kids. It gets kids in the woods and all this stuff. So if you got rid of that, you would just have to, I don't know, it could be filled in though. There's plenty of lizard men, dog men, and moth men, and other stuff.
You say good for kids. It wasn't good for me, man. For like 2 years of my life, I suffocated myself to sleep every night because I was afraid Bigfoot was looking at me through my window. So,
yeah, that's a funny thing because I think back a certain number of years ago, Bigfoot was a lot scarier.
Yeah.
Now, since finding Bigfoot and we're knocking and whistling and la la la, kids are like, yeah, I want to go hunting Bigfoot. I'm like, dude, when I was a kid, Legend of Boggy Creek and stuff, all I knew is Bigfoot was, he's going to rip me up. And and if my dad left me in that tree stand, and I can remember like early on, son, you go over your own stand. And I remember sitting up there going, dude, this is scary.
Yeah.
And then the Patterson Gimlin film starts rolling in my head, and I'm like, dude, I don't know about this. This whole hunting thing is frightening.
Yeah, no kidding, man. I've been the same spot. I can remember going and buying a brighter flashlight at Walmart just because.
I'm all about a bright headlamp, man.
So if Bigfoot, say that happens, Bigfoot's found, and Lyle doesn't have quite the same passions or people to interview. What's your next cryptid that you're going to go try to figure some stuff out about?
Well, I'm kind of looking towards doing a book on the Dogman phenomenon because as of in the last 2 or 3 years, there's a lot more sightings of these kind of bipedal canid creatures. Like living werewolves or something. And there's a lot of cool historical reports of that. So, that's something that, has appealed to me just because it's like, wow, people reporting werewolf things in modern times, I want to look into this. So, I would probably just go on to that, and that would become the next. It doesn't have the lovable feel like Bigfoot, so it can never, you're not going to have the Dogman board game or whether, like you have Bigfoot commercials or whatever, but I like it because it's spooky, so that'd probably, whether Bigfoot's proven or not, that's probably a place where I'll go do some more research.
Sure, yeah. So, we're in Texas. We got to talk about the chupacabra, right? Like is that related to Dogman at all?
No, that's something different, and it's actually a bit of a twisted cryptid because the original reports of what we call chupacabra, which translates to goat sucker, in Spanish. Those reports started coming out of the Puerto Rico area in 1995, and people described a creature that was killing livestock and presumably drinking their blood. They said that it was about 3 or 4 feet tall. It stood on 2 legs. It had big eyes and spikes on its back. It was kind of alien looking. And then about, in the 2000s, people started seeing these other weird dog-looking creatures in the south and southeast, including Texas, with these sort of mangy-looking coyote-type things. And then the media called them chupacabras. So those were two different things. So when people say Texas chupacabra, obviously we were talking about that, the hairless, strange-looking canid that's caught on dash cameras, and there's actually some carcasses and stuffed specimens that suggest that while it's not very monstrous, it could literally be a cryptid, because it could be a hybrid canid species of a red wolf or coyote or something else with some sort of medical situation that has kind of created this little creepy looking dog.
Does the fact that the chupacabra kind of comes from like maybe a less developed country affect how research is done and how much they're able to prove that is or isn't some kind of mangy coyote?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in countries where you can't access the locations very well. This is like the Yurren of China when you're talking about going into the Yucatan jungle, or I believe that's what it is in Puerto Rico, where a lot of these sightings early on had occurred. There's just not a lot of people that are doing research and going out there, and it's not something I can, hop very easily drive to or hop on a plane, to go in search of that. So there's just less research done on those. So, who knows if there was something behind that, or, is there still something to it? And then, and even just simply in Texas, what are these canids? We just don't have enough specimens, but I get people reporting sightings of these to me every once in a while. So they're both kind of unsolved mysteries, really.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So another one from kind of south of the border. I've grown up around some migrant workers, and some of them were from Coahuila area of Mexico, and they would tell stories of the bruja. Have you ever heard of the bruja? You know what the bruja is?
Well, like that's the witch kind of.
Yeah, and like these Mexican guys would still run from the barn to their house at night. Like they would not walk at night because they were scared of the bruja, man. Like they were believers.
And is this like there's like the legends of the lechuza, which is kind of an owl type creature. I guess there's that, and then there's sort of that flying witch kind of. But I'm not sure if both of those are sort of derivative of the same thing, or whether there's two distinctive phenomenons. But either way, they're both pretty creepy, and there's just something about that whole Mexican vibe of bruja and evil witch owls and what have you.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, man. And, like it's really easy to write it off, but then when you see a 35-year-old man who's scared and running, like that's a different deal. It's like, man, there's something to this. It's weird. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that just goes to show you, I mean, this stuff is going on out there in certain cultures and certain areas that there's phenomenon that we just don't know a lot about,
Yeah. What about the marine stuff, like Champ and Nessie? How you feel about that stuff?
Yeah, I'm intrigued by that. I think at this point, Loch Ness is probably, more or less, we know it's probably not a plesiosaur dinosaur in there. It's, there's some phenomenon going on, but it's less than a giant dinosaur. But Champ, it's, there's a lot of credible sightings and a lot of good research been done up there. I like river monsters. There's the Tensas River over in Louisiana. There's a video taken by a guy that was flying over some farms out there that shows some giant thing swimming in that. And I followed up with that as best I could and found some reports. And then let's see what else, the White River Monster from Arkansas, some that are a little bit closer to us that are sort of, that sort of aquatic swimming thing. And of course, I loved the Loch Ness Monster when I was a kid, so I've always been attracted to any reports I get, especially if they're closer to our area.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check out that Louisiana one. I hadn't heard of that before. That's real cool. Did you ever read the book Locke by Paul Zindel?
I did, yeah. That's a really good book.
Yeah, that was probably my first, outside of like Bigfoot stuff, that was like my first thing that kind of turned me on to, kind of cryptids and stuff. That's pretty cool, man. As like a 12 or 13-year-old man, it's just like your mind starts expanding so much when you start thinking about like the weird and supernatural stuff like that, or not even supernatural, just like unknown, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great book. It's really done well, and there's one of my other favorites that is very not as well known, but there's another loch in Scotland called Loch Morar. And there's been sightings of a creature there called Morag. And there's, it's very similar to Loch Ness, but it's one of those, it just never got the publicity, but there's just equally as cool. And there's a book called The Search for Morag that's really, it's almost like Loch Ness, but creepier. And, so yeah, I've always loved those kind of tales.
Sure. So, it has to come to this, though. We have to know what you think. Do you believe in Bigfoot or not?
Well, I say I believe in the possibility because to believe, I try to stay balanced and rational about this, and I certainly want to. I want there to be these things out there, and I want them to exist, and I want to believe in them. But I think the best I can do is believe in the possibility. It's possible that in some sort of undiscovered ape-like creature is lurking under our noses in North America, and that's based on personal research, going to these areas, interviewing people. Not everybody I interview probably saw a Bigfoot. I mean, there's room for error and mistake, and the people are sincere. They're not hallucinating. They saw something, but there is a certain percentage of those that I know the person saw something and they saw it well enough to rule out other things, and there is no explanation for it. I don't know how to explain it, without having a specimen, but there's something to it, and that's why I believe in that possibility and keep an open mind about it until such proof becomes available or doesn't. But the mystery still lingers on for me, as far as Bigfoot especially, and, a number of these other cases as well.
Yeah.
So if Bigfoot does not exist, does that mean that these people are seeing bears, or are there weird people running around in the woods trying to scare people, or what's the deal?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it would be all of the above. I mean, because to explain away all of these sightings, and there is a lot, they go back many years. To explain away all of them, you would have to tally up. They can't all be hoaxes. They can't all be old Jim Bob's cousin dressing in a suit running under tree stands in front of hunters or whatever.
That's dangerous, first of all.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, how do you explain some of these like that? It's like no idiot is going to go out there and go in the woods, especially if it's a guy who lives in an area where people hunt.
Yeah.
some of them certainly could be a shadow or a tree stump or a bear or even a horse's ass. I mean, if you saw, I mean, that sounds crazy, but
no, I get it though.
You know what I'm saying? Like I know a couple of instances where a guy said, the only other thing I could think it was is seeing a horse or something like at a certain, I'm like, that's a, they're being
sure.
devil's advocate. But I think that it's almost it seems more ridiculous to try to explain away every single one of these things than to say that there is something out there that exists that we just haven't proven yet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You've dedicated a big portion of your life to this. I mean, it's part of who you are, right? The monster hunter. It'd be hard to ever disprove Bigfoot, and so that's kind of where there's a little solace in this. But like, if it ever came to that, or you got to the point where personally you were convicted that there's no way this thing's out there, would you feel like you've wasted some time?
No, I wouldn't, and that's because of, like I was saying before, in some ways, if I was solely out to prove Bigfoot and that was my only, narrow focus of this, yeah, I would feel like I've wasted a lot of time. But my appeal to this is more broad. I enjoy the stories, the legends. I enjoy researching them, talking to people. I love going out into the outdoors, and this puts me in places I would have never gone, like by visiting a witness who lives some way out here. They invite me in their house and they take me out and show me some cool stuff, and I go in swamps and all this. Like, that is the reward. It's like, even if it turns out that I've been chasing nothing or what have you, it was really cool along the way, and I met all these cool people, and I saw a lot of America, and I saw the spookiest parts of our woodlands, and so I feel that makes me feel like I didn't waste time, even if it does get disproven.
Sure, yeah. Do you does it ever weigh on you, like watching horror movies and writing spooky books and visiting with these people? Does it ever weigh on you? Do you ever have bad dreams? I mean, how does that look for you as far as just like your lifestyle, I guess?
Yeah, it never really. I mean, I guess the only weight it could be is like, some people are traumatized by it. You kind of feel a little sorry for them or something, that you don't have a better answer for them, or, you're in some cases I'm sort of like this counselor going, yes, you're not the only person that has seen something like this,
Yeah.
Trust me. But really, I mean, as far as it doesn't, I'm not scared by any of it or have nightmares because of it. I at this point, even my office, and if you go to my YouTube channel, you can see a tour of my office. There's monster stuff all over it. It's like I just feel surrounded by that because I liked it as a kid. I like it now. And just the fact that I'm part of my living is made from monster tales. It's almost like this is great. Who would ever thought I could grow up to be a monster hunter and make a living? I mean,
yeah, it's freaking cool, man. And you're a cool dude, man. It's been good to talk to you about this stuff and to kind of get to pick your brain. And you have written many books about this stuff. You're an authority on this stuff. If somebody wants to read some of your stuff, where can they go and find your books?
Well, you can find all the info on the stuff I've done at my website at Lyle Blackburn, LYLE Blackburn.com. And my books are available on Amazon, both electronic format and paperback, and some are even hardback. And you can also watch a lot of documentaries I've been involved in through a company called Small Town Monsters. Those are all viewable on Amazon Prime Video.
Ooh, nice.
So, and some of those complement. There's like the Boggy Creek Monster documentary that kind of complements my Beast of Boggy Creek book. So, there's visuals, there's reading, and all sorts of stuff. So definitely drop by my website at
And, you can get links to everything from there, including my band, Ghoul Town, and all the music's available everywhere, iTunes and Amazon and where finer music is sold.
Yeah, cool, man. You actually have a pretty recent release on the book front, don't you?
Yes, as a matter of fact, this is very timely because just today, my new book was released. It's called Sinister Swamps, Monsters and Mysteries from the Mire. Ooh. And in this one, instead of focusing on a particular type of creature or a particular case, I concentrate on the geographic locations of swamps, and nothing is spookier and more fascinating than swamps. So I talk about a lot of the major notorious swamps around North America where there's been a long history of phenomenon, which includes not only cryptids and monster sightings, but ghosts, spook lights, strange disappearances, lost villages, plane crashes that crash in these swamps they could never find, and all sorts of mysteries. So this was a fun one where I could kind of branch out and embrace a much wider variety of spooky topics. And so that's Sinister Swamps, and it literally went live on Amazon today, and you can pre-order autograph copies from my site.
Ooh, so. Nice. I was going to ask you that if you could get some autograph stuff. That's cool, man. I'm going to have to check that out. That sounds real interesting. Do you have merchandise too, like T-shirts, Bigfoot T-shirts, or anything like that?
Yeah. I've got mostly Boggy Creek, some Boggy Creek shirts. But yeah, from my site, there's my online store, and that's where a lot of people want autograph books and stuff, and then as well the T-shirts and stuff, because I do a lot of events. There's tons of Bigfoot conferences. There's the Mothman Festival, so I go around and do book signings and speaking events everywhere. So it's always cool to take take the merch and the books and what have you.
Yeah, cool. Do you want to be solicited with people who have Bigfoot stories or encounters?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm always open to hearing of encounters, and whether I just simply log them for the record, or whether they turn out to be something that I would work perfectly in a book or a subject I'm researching. I definitely am always trying to take as many of the reports as I possibly can.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, we'll be sure and link to your website and all that stuff down below. Guys, go check out Lyle's music. We were listening to some of it a while ago before we got on the phone with him. It's pretty cool stuff, man. Good rock vibes there, and definitely will be checking out some of the books and stuff, man. But dude, we can't thank you enough for your time. I know it's probably gets to be a snooze fest to get on for an hour and talk to a couple of amateurs all the time, but we appreciate it, man. And I can't tell you. You probably know this, and you have this effect on people, but I had completely gotten over my fear of the willies of Bigfoot, and now that we've been talking about this stuff,
yeah, me too.
Like I'm going to sleep a little closer to my wife tonight, so she'll be appreciative of that, I guess. So anyways, thanks, Lyle. We really appreciate your time, man.
No problem. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Tyler, I was really considering hunting the Ouachita Mountains, but I don't think I'm going to be purchasing an Oklahoma license anymore, sir.
Let me tell you, one thing that didn't cross my mind that day was that it was Bigfoot.
I know. You want to talk about something that's crossing my mind right now? That it was Bigfoot. Yeah. Because this dude legit just described the place we went.
Yeah. And let me tell you this. Do you remember when we were like, you thought it was a bear, then you thought it was a pig, and I thought it was a bear after I got a look at it? And so we were like kind of debating like what we saw. Mm-hmm. And then you just go, I don't know what it was really, but that thing was moving through the woods. Like it was getting it, dude. Like I know an animal can do that. We actually talked to Brian Koch about how fast a pig is recently.
Yeah, that's true.
We know that this isn't a truth, but they say 30 miles an hour. In the mountains, in the rocks, if it was a pig, there's no way. I don't think.
It's a good point. Like it definitely probably means it was a bear. And Or
well, I'm just saying
this
30 miles an hour is no way. But whatever it is, man, it was just tearing through the woods.
It was. It did not like that we were there.
Let me tell you this though, I really don't think I believe in Bigfoot.
Do you not?
But what I just experienced with Lyle has got me questioning some things for sure. Like it's got like this possibility thing creeping into my mind. I definitely would not have been a believer before this podcast.
Yeah.
But Lyle's a pretty even keel, kind of rational guy. It seems like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to just think that as many people as he has interviewed that, like he said, like something weird isn't going on.
Yeah.
It's weird,
I
man.
think that like the world needs things like Bigfoot somewhat, especially since we're getting in such a time where everything's getting explored. I know everybody's like, well, 7/8 of the ocean has yet to be explored. Well, nothing lives down there, so it's not that big of a deal. But like, there's not a lot of places on land that people haven't gone and looked at and explored, right? So like, you kind of need these unsolved mysteries to kind of keep a little wild out there. Like I kind of crave that idea of. I like to fancy that I would be one of the people who ventures onto the frontier. I don't know if that's the case or not. It probably depends on your social situation and a lot of other things that happen into you. But like, say 1850, right, or whatever the date is. Like, I kind of like that wild aspect. Is that true or not? I don't know. But either way, like, kind of the big frontier now, you could say, is like this whole cryptid thing, right? Where, what else is there to like explore that people are like, I don't know if that's even a real deal or, whatever. I don't know if there's an ocean on the other side of that thing, I don't know. It's just like
you're right, man.
It's a neat thing.
I think about this a lot with trout fishing.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, man, it would be so cool to go there or here or whatever. Think about this. We went to the Gila last year and walked pretty much as far as we could possibly walk into the wilderness and out. You know what I mean? And we get there and there's campfires and nails stuck in trees and it's like
barrels.
Yeah, and it's like, and of course these people, most of them are horsebacking in, but it's just like, man. And I know the same thing happens like in some of these huge wilderness areas in the Frank Church and all that up north. Dudes are going 30 miles down a trail and they're still encountering like fire rings and stuff. And it's just, it kind of is a little bit disappointing when I think about it, because I think about these wild places that you could go. And I've got a book called Fly Fishing the Rocky Mountain Backcountry, I think is what it is. And this guy's like, he's all business, man, and he's just like a straight up like marathon hiker / fly fisher, and he'll do like 100-mile like through like from one road through a mountain range to another road and have somebody pick him up like after walking 100 miles and fishing like 25 lakes or whatever, and he'll fish them for just an hour sometimes, and then like write down what he finds. And I think about that and I'm like, man, and he's doing off trail stuff. Like a lot of this stuff is not on trail. He's just going off of maps and going, hopping over from one to another. And I'm like, man, that has some cool, wild stuff, but even that guy has been there. You know what I mean? Even that's not really a frontier anymore.
You want to know something that's kind of interesting? Is that it's not cool up until a certain point in time. Like if I go somewhere, for instance, and I find, like a Coke can, I'm like, well, that's lame. But if I go and find like a piece of Indian pottery, that's freaking cool. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I guess it's probably because it's a separate civilization from what we live in. But even not that, like sometimes I'll find like an old beer can that has like the pull tab as opposed to, a regular like, whatever they are, the little 8 looking things,
Yeah.
And like it kind of has like a little feeling of like, oh, that's neat, man. Like somebody way back in the day, like, well, for instance, we find a ladder stand on public land, we're ticked.
Yeah.
You find an old wooden stand, you're like, oh, that's cool.
This is a spot right here.
It's real weird. You kind of have like these predetermined, bias against like human interference with stuff.
It's true, man. It's true. I didn't think about that, but it is the truth, man. And I've never found an arrowhead, so I'll just go ahead and wail in that pity right there for sure. Man, as far as I really appreciate Lyle coming on, man. That was cool. And I know this is like probably not in the vein of what normally he's able to kind of promote his stuff through, you know. So whether that's a thing that he wanted or not, he still agreed to do this, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, and if you're into this stuff, go buy one of his books or something. Like, I think I'd like to buy a book and maybe a T-shirt. You know, like having a Bigfoot T-shirt would be cool, especially if it's like legit, not just like something you pick up in Hochtown.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, I had a Sasquatch shirt, whatever that Sasquatch show was. I can't remember what it was on
Squatch Hunters.
Discovery. No, it was full Sasquatch in the title, I think. I can't remember. Anyway, I had a shirt though. It was like a big Sasquatch on it. It was cool. You know, there's a place that Lyle has spoken before when he was talking about his speaking engagements at like different festivals and stuff. Or I guess he was just talking about different festivals that arise. But there's a place in Oklahoma, and they don't pronounce it this way, so excuse me, but it's called Honobia, Honobia, I think is how it is. And
there's a WMA up there, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there is. A lot of that stuff is like forestry land, and my dad kind of got a wild hair one year, a couple of years back, several years ago, not too long, but a few years back. He kind of came across this like bear lease, super cheap, lease or whatever, and I guess it was on some of that forestry land, or not, like timbered land or whatever. And so he like paid for me and him a spot, and we went up there and put out bait barrels, and it was like it's based on like a quota system, I think, but we were going to get a chance to maybe shoot a bear in Oklahoma, and so we put out these bait barrels and like chained them to tree, bought all this stuff, put game cameras out, and never went back.
There's cameras up there still?
I mean, they're probably taken at this point because they're at, these sites that we kind of had to tell the organizer where it was, the guy that kind of organizes all the people on the lease or whatever. But like, I'm sure they went and got them or whatever, but like we never went back.
Dang.
I know, kind of stinks. It was one of those deals where like, because of the quota, there's only a couple of days that you're going to probably be able to hunt bears, And so, since we weren't able to make it that year, we just never went back and got the stuff.
There could have been Squatch on those cameras.
Could have been. That's that Honobia. There's a festival there that's like it's like the Bigfoot capital of that whole area.
Hot dog.
Yeah. So pretty.
Is
weird.
that a self-proclaimed thing, or does somebody give you that?
It's a big deal. Look it up.
Yeah,
it's a big deal. Like when he was talking about the thousands of people that show up to festivals, he was talking about that town. I think because it's weird. There's nothing there, and then all of a sudden this Bigfoot festival comes in, and like RV parks light up, and
that's cool.
Everything. So yeah. Anyway.
I bet you there's some cool. Those lights people hang outside their RVs.
Yeah.
I bet you there's
Christmas
some cool
lights?
Bigfoot. Well. Yeah, but it's not Christmas,
Yeah.
Probably some cool Bigfoot ones
around
those RVs.
Imagine there's all kinds of cool Bigfoot stuff.
I bet.
I think it gets weird out at some of them festivals.
I'd imagine.
Yeah.
I'd imagine.
So, the question that I'm going to pose as we leave here is, I'd like for you out there to let us know through social media or however you fancy letting us know, do you believe in Bigfoot and why or why not? I'd like to hear what some people have to say about this. And if anybody has a story, I would like to hear that too.
Yes.
Send us an email.
Oh, yes.
I want to see that. So anyway, don't forget to do that. And remember, this is your element.
Living it.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona, April 24. The Balboa Theater in San Diego, April 25. The Grove in Anaheim, California, April 27. The Crest Theater in Sacramento, April 29. The Union in Salt Lake City, April 30. The Egyptian in Boise, May 1. The Wilma Theater in Missoula, May 2. The Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington, May 4. Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon, and May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.